Connect Group is one of the only companies in the UAE who offer corporate services company formation along with EOR. A lot of our clients over the years have said to us, I don't know if I want to set up an entity or I want to do the EOR model. Today, me and Richard are going to put that debate to bed by debating both sides of the coin, company setup versus EOR.
Well, opening a company allows you to draw down your tax burden, and most of our clients are coming from very high corporate tax environments. So having a great write-off that's fully compliant, like a headquarters or a nice fancy office, helps reduce that tax burden quite considerably.
From an EOR point of view, what do you use that trade license for? Would be my question. Are you actually utilizing the trade license, or are you still using the trade license from your home country or wherever you're doing your business? A lot of the clients we work with say to me, I've had a trade license here for 3-4 years, but not once have I ever had to put that name of that trade license on an invoice. From an EOR point of view, compliance is fully handled by Connect Resources. We have a compliance department. So when you move your employees here under our sponsorship as opposed to your own sponsorship, you don't have to hire, for example, a compliance manager, a legal manager. It's all handled by a company who have 20+ years in the region and are monitoring regulations as they're introduced in this country.
That's a great point about compliance, but there are certain activities, for example, engineering activities, financial activities, where you do need to be compliant to the UAE compliance rules. So there are regulators here which need you to have a trade license in order to license you to do these activities within the UAE. So accessing an Arabic and UAE Middle Eastern market comes with that compliance. You need to have a trade license, and that trade license needs to be approved by the regulators here.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually, because there is certain activities that we at EOR would advise to set up a company. For example, exporting food. You're not going to export food through an EOR model because one, you need, as you mentioned, compliance on the right licensing to export the food. You need the license to be able to even work through a logistics company. Certain activities, example, software development or an e-commerce platform, they do not use their trade license. If they have already an international setup or a headquarters outside, they are not using their trade license here unless they are working with potentially government clients who want to see the UAE trade license. On EOR, the upfront costs that we charge are if not cheaper, costs than you would have setting up your business. So we're category A visa. Most companies that set up, especially in the mainland, will start at category C. So their visa cost is already maybe 3,000, 4,000 more expensive than what we have at category A. So companies straight off the bat are saving on the visa cost. Medical insurance, because we're a large company and work with over 400 clients, we get very good medical insurance rates. So again, companies that were setting up here would have to utilize medical insurance, and they would get very poor rates as a startup. So companies that set up under EOR are saving on them two elements off the bat. Yes, we do charge a management fee monthly, anything between kind of 300 to 500 USD per employee. So as a startup, it's not a massive amount. Yes, as you grow as a company, the management fee can get extensively higher, but as a startup setting up, you have very little overheads.
And I'll give you that, Liam. That's a good point. However, I'll rebuttal with these trade license costs, although capital intensive at first, can be a great way to draw down your tax liability in the region where you currently domicile. So it is a great write-off opportunity. And along with that, as you scale, your monthly expenses for EOR can become quite big if you're talking 100, 200, 300 employees. Whereas if those are all under your control, you just bear the visa costs. You're not paying a third party or a company to outsource and charge you a significant fee for managing those 100 to 500 employee types of companies.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is I do agree that if you're scaling up to 100, 200 employees, there's a massive cost in terms of management fees. But if you're a company coming into the region with a small scale plan for year 1, year 2, EOR gives you the flexibility to know if it is a market you want to enter into before you actually enter it. Whereas you set up a company here, you hire 10 staff, you realize that this is not a market that's going to work for your product. And I'm talking again about some of our software companies. They've come here with big ideas, big plans. We're going to be the best platform in the region. Didn't work out. They've had to then liquidate that company, terminate their staff. The costs have built up. Whereas if they were under the EOR model, for them staff, they would have at any moment been able to give notice period to the EOR company, terminate their staff, and not have any liquidation costs.
Fair point, but corporate tax here is 9%, whereas in other regions, a lot of our clients are European, North American. The tax savings alone will take care of all of these liquidation costs, these costs of the trade license, these costs of onboarding. They're not that significant as is. Obviously at scale, it does get quite capital intensive, but this saving in tax alone, in many cases, for many of our clients, it takes care of itself. Expenses are not a concern.
Yeah, so another point I would make on compliance is under EOR, we take full responsibility for liability of changes in regulation. Amortization is a new regulation that's come in. All of these regulation changes, we take liability for them in terms of making sure that our clients are compliant, but also we as a business are compliant. When you set up a company in the UAE, and let's say you're a small startup, you don't hire people at legal or compliance or somebody checking this, and more it's being managed from outside. What is keeping companies compliant here, and what happens when the likes of a massive penalty is put on a company, which we see all the time on massive penalties are given to companies who don't understand what they needed to do in terms of regulation or compliance.
Fair point, but with the right guidance, when you set up, for instance with Connect Group, you could avoid any future problems. So we set people up the right way from day one, so to reduce the likelihood that there would be any compliance issues in day 120, day 365. With the right guidance at first and the transparency of the UAE's laws, very easy to understand, very business-friendly laws, another reason you should move here, you can get the guidance at day one to make sure that that never happens.
Do you give guidance on amortization at company setup stage?
We do very basic overviews of what the quota is of Emiratis you need to hire per number of employees. Do we hire those employees for you? We can, but that's more down the line kind of thinking. When you set up the company, we assist with the trade license, we assist with the visas of employees, onboarding of those employees. But Emiratization is really something we would consult on. But if you want to do that, that is something we can help with at a later stage. Now, Emiratization for most companies who are just coming to experiment in this market is not a concern. It's typically from 20 employees onwards that you would have that kind of oversight that needs to be had. And to be fair, you do need to have that kind of help, but only at a certain scale. Most companies in business are between 0 to 5 employees in year one.
And do you do the visas for companies that set up? And if you are doing the visas, are you also managing and tracking compliance and amortization and regulations that change?
We definitely are doing all the visa processes. So an employee will arrive in day one, we will help with onboarding, we will do their visa processes for them, the biometrics, the medicals, all of these standard things. However, going forward with compliance, that is on the client to manage for themselves. Now, it's not a massive burden that they need to involve the likes of software to manage. It's very clear to understand at what point you will need to factor in these things. But from day one, we do advise on at which stage of the business you would need to seek outside help for that kind of thing.
With the EOR, I suppose that's a major benefit is that from day one to 2 years to 4 years to 5 years, your employees under EOR, it's being fully managed in terms of compliance. As I say, in the UAE, things change very quickly. Laws are changed overnight. If you're a company trying to manage that from outside, and your HR department is based in Europe, for example, they're not going to pick up on these law changes. They're not going to be able to know what to do as soon as possible. We have a dedicated team who are making sure that not just Connect Resources, but each of the 400, 500 clients that we currently have in EOR are all adhering to the same regulations.
Okay, so on time, it depends very much the scale of your setup, and it depends on the activity of the business, the jurisdiction of where your clients will be. If we're talking free zone, which a good majority of the companies coming into the UAE market will end up setting up in, very easy. 2 weeks, all online, trade licenses done, and then you need to begin with the visas. Now, when it comes to compliance steps, if there's a certain regulator involved, that is up to the regulator to decide. But once again, this is a testament to the UAE things like Dubai Municipality, for example, RERA, all of these very heavy regulations can be handled and approvals can be gotten within 1 week. So on the time intensive side of company setup, it is not too time intensive. We say, as a general rule, 1 month is more than enough time to set up any kind of company, as long as it's not crypto related, very high scale investment banking. That can take time. There's audits that need to happen. But the licensing itself and the visas itself, given that the UAE is very investor friendly, it is not too much time at all.
So what you're saying is that within 1 month, you can have your employees based in the UAE, right?
That's true. In the case of a free zone or mainland, the license itself can only take a maximum of 2 to 3 weeks. Regulators aside, which as we've discussed can only take between 1 week. Now there are exceptions, for example, SIRA, the crypto regulators like the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, VARA. This can take time and understandably so, there are audits that need to happen first before they'll give you that license. But when it comes to onboarding employees, all visa processes, no matter how many employees you're onboarding, can be handled within 2 weeks.
And can you pay your employees within 2 weeks?
You certainly can under the right conditions. So mainland companies need to register for WPS, which is not too complicated to register for. We can assist with that. We do assist with that. Once you're registered, you can pay your employees right away. When it comes to free zones, certain free zones are exempt from this rule, but majority of the free zones do not require WPS regulation, which means you can pay them as you like, and you can pay them from week 1, month 1, as you need.
And does a company bank account take long to set up?
That's a fair point. I mean, banking is much more difficult now than say 3 years ago, but for good reasons, which ultimately protect everyone. We want to be able to bank with European companies. We want to be banking with US companies. And to do that, we need to be compliant with EU and US standards. Now, this is what slowed down opening up a bank account in the UAE. However, it's not an impossible task. Most big banks will open within 1 month to a maximum of 6 weeks. Obviously activity dependent, nationality dependent, but we can assist with all of these things and make sure the documents are prepared in the right way to reduce that lead time down.
So am I right in saying, from what you've said, that 3 weeks you could have the license and the visa, a separate 5-6 weeks potentially to get a bank account? So realistically, you're talking 3 months before you could pay your employees through your bank account, local bank account, through WPS. Is that right?
That can be the case for many people. For certain people, and like we said, the majority of people setting up in the UAE are setting up in free zones where there is no WPS.
Correct.
And they're not more than 5 employees. So these kinds of clients can pay their employees very quickly. They'll have a trade license in 2 weeks. They'll have a bank account in 1 week with a bank like WEO, for example, who they have the same kind of regulation by the central bank, but they have sped up the processes of onboarding. So within 3 weeks, they could technically pay an employee.
Okay, very good. So on the EOR side, I guess it's much simpler with the majority, 99% of nationalities. We can have them set up within 4 days in terms of the work permit, which legally makes them approved in the UAE as a worker. Another week on top of that will get them their Emirates ID, and they can be payrolled essentially from the moment that we have the work permit. So you're talking about, if you wanted to move 5 employees tomorrow to the UAE, within 4 days they would have the work permit to come here, and within an additional week they would have their Emirates ID and everything would be finished. So it's something for companies that have a time frame and are time sensitive about being here. Again, it's dependent on activities and stuff like that, but if they're a company that has a product already running in another country, and it's more about moving staff to expand the market, for example, sales managers, sales directors, to expand into the MENA region, you can have them here working compliantly and payrolled in that first month with no restrictions on approvals. And that's, I suppose, the guarantee that we give to our clients, is that from the moment that we sign the contract and the moment that the first invoice is paid, we can guarantee your employees can be here within 2 weeks. EOR is definitely a product that works not for every client, and we, as Connect Group, we consult our clients on what is the best option, given that we know what the activity is, given that we know how large they're going to scale to. We understand why they're coming into this market at the early point. But EOR definitely gives you the fastest way to market, It gives you an overview and a research of the market before you set up. And a lot of our companies, or a lot of EOR clients that we have, set up their business after 1 or 2 years under the EOR model, because they're confident then, or they're happy then to know that this is a market that works for them. It's cost effective from the start. Its time frame is very quick, as I said. Compliance, they don't have to worry about. We take that liability, and it's a market entry point that makes sense for a lot of companies, especially if you're only getting a trade license to get visas or to put bodies in the UAE, then EOR is the right one. If you're getting a trade license for the point that you need to do an activity inside of the UAE that requires you to have that license, then company setup is for you.